I want to welcome you all. My name is David Irvine. For those of you who don't know me, ordinarily Kristen is here to introduce me, but she's away this week. And so I'm going to be on my own here. Here's how the deal works. I really appreciate you spending this hour with me. I'll talk for approximately an hour, 50 to 60 minutes. And then for those of you who can stay on, I like to have a dialogue. We turn on the cameras and we unmute you and we turn off the video recording. For those of you who can stay an extra half an hour, we'll have a dialogue and a conversation and a connection. This is an amazing community that gets developed over the course of a year and longer. Some of you have been coming to these webinars regularly for many months, and I've missed you all over the summer. I know we didn't have a webinar in July, so I'm grateful to have you back, grateful to have you here. Folks, for those of you who don't know me, I've been in the leadership development field, gosh, now for over 40 years. This is a bit of a cross section of some of the clients I've worked with over the years. Over these, at least in recent years, we've had some amazing clients that I've had the privilege of working with, many of who are on this call today and have stayed with me and stayed part of our community. So my whole approach is working with leaders. I'll give you sort of a summary here. My philosophy, and I'm not going to get into the whole detail of how my philosophy was developed. Many of you have heard my story, but it's basically leadership the authentic way. Authenticity is a big focus of mine, as many of you know. And it's really about amplifying your impact and your influence as a leader in any area of your life. So some of you might be parents, some of you might be CEOs, entrepreneurs, middle managers, frontline supervisors, leaders in your home, leaders in the community, and on a board of directors. It makes no difference. Any area in your life, it's about amplifying your influence and your impact as a leader, however you define yourself as a leader, making your highest contribution toward the things that truly matter to you. And number 3, living life with less stress, more focus, and greater meaning and fulfillment. So that's the whole approach that I take. 3 assumptions in this approach is that the strength of your leadership and the capacity to influence comes from your presence, not from your position. It's who you are as a person. Think back on the leaders that you've had in your life and the people who have influenced you. And they influence you and they make a difference in your life, not because of their position. Their position might be a tool, but their real gift comes from who they are as a person. Everything flows from your own well-being. So how comfortable are you with yourself? How much at peace you are with yourself? Everything flows from that perspective. I know when I'm at peace with myself, I'm a much better leader, and I'm a much different leader than when I'm stressed. So everything flows from your own well-being, and that's what we're going to focus on. That's my focus. There's a whole systems approach to leadership where we look at changing whole cultures, and I've certainly done my work in systems change. But my focus in these webinars certainly is on individual change and individually looking within yourself. Number 3, your presence is deepened through self-examination and through self-awareness. Leadership is both active and reflective. Yes, it's very active, but it also requires time to step back and get some self-awareness, get some self-examination. I don't know how many of you have ever worked for someone, you know, as I often say, we're all perhaps, how many of you have ever worked for a jerk that you would call this is a jerk to work for, just a very insensitive person? Well, my argument is if they could at least see that they were insensitive and see the jerk in them and admit that, it would be a very different leadership experience. If they could see it, if we can be aware of how our behavior impacts other people, it makes all the difference in the world. And it's a big premise of mine, taking time to stop and reflect. Some of you have had some holidays over the summer. I hope that you've had a bit of a break. For some people, summer can be the busiest time of the year. But I also recognize that it's also a time for some self-reflection. And I would encourage you, what we're going to do in the next hour, I'm going to take you on a journey here. And I'm hoping that my premise here is to give you some reflection time, to give you some time to get off the busy treadmill. Some of you have already done that this summer. It's one of the gifts of sometimes summer holidays, is to get you into a different environment, to get you into a different reality, to help you just see your life in a different way. We all understand the freshness of holidays, but I think we have to give, my premise is that we have to give ourselves a structured time to stop and reflect. We have busy lives today, and there are times in our lives where we're on narrow roads. And at those times, we're fools if we try to maintain our usual speed. One of my messages today is slow down. Give yourself an opportunity to really reflect on your life, okay? It's an old and ironic habit of human beings to run faster when we've lost our way. Anybody that's working in corporations today, anybody that's working in any kind of public service understands the demands on our time and the speed that's required to make, if you are in customer service, people want it yesterday. We have an enormously fast culture today. We buy a computer, we want it faster. I get it. I'm part of that culture as well. But it's an old and ironic habit that we run faster when we've lost our way. I think we all understand, if you've ever spent time in nature, as I have, spent a great deal of time where I've been lost. And the natural tendency is to speed up. But what happens when you speed up is you get more anxious and you get lost faster. So what's required is to slow down and to get your bearings. Stop and get your bearings. And that's really what I'm offering you today, is a pathway to getting your own personal bearings in your life. Maybe you're moving into a new chapter in your life. Maybe you're just coming out of a dark time. Anybody that's been connected to, I'm in Western Canada here, where we've had a significant amount of fires and a significant amount of disruption. If you're in the Jasper area, you understand that this has been a very disruptive time. Or if you're connected to that community and to the many communities that have been impacted by fire in Western Canada, or by severe weather patterns anywhere in certainly around the planet these days. Maybe you're just coming out of a disruptive time. Maybe you're coming out of a reflective time. Maybe you're moving into this new chapter in your life. What's critical, I know, I'll share some of my own experience here. We've been in the process of downsizing this last 2 months. Actually, it's been probably about a 4 or 5 month process. But we're moving next week. So we've been, we've been busy downsizing and busy giving stuff away and getting free of some of the trappings that we've had for our life. It's amazing how much that, we build up and keep. And we've just been giving stuff away. And, so we've become so busy doing that I need to remember to take my own message here, that it's important to stop and get my bearings every once in a while as I go through this. And that's what the message is that we're going to be focusing on today. This is not necessarily a postmodern dilemma, this notion of busyness. Beware the barrenness of a busy life. I'm very curious, thousands of years, a couple thousand years ago, when Socrates wrote this, what did he mean by that? What does it mean to have the barrenness of a busy life? And I would argue that if we don't stop and say, what is examine our lives in some detail, is life really, truly worth living? Okay. What in your life is calling you when all the noise is silenced and the meetings adjourned and the lists and agendas laid aside? What still pulls on your soul? And the silence between your heartbeats, hides a summons. Do you hear it? Name it if you must, or forever leave it nameless. But why pretend that it's not there? A big part of authenticity for me is paying attention to the quietness within us, to the quiet voice inside that says, you know what? This is where your voice, this is where your life needs to be. And we get lost in the busyness and the noise of the corporations that we work in the organizations that we work in our culture. There's just a lot of noise today. People wake up with their cell phone on their bedside table, immediately checking news, their Facebook feeds. It's a great tool, but when do we have time to stop and reflect and go inside? And that's what I'm offering you today, is an opportunity for some self-reflection. So the agenda for the next hour, this 45 minutes, 50 minutes that we spend together, I'm going to share with you my own story, my own journey these days. And I'm going to be pretty raw with you. It's not rehearsed. I've got a few slides to give me a guide, but I'm going to be pretty vulnerable with you in terms of what I'm going through in my own life right now to come to grips with this. And then I'm going to offer to you a roadmap, which are what I would describe as the 4 pillars of an authentic life or a good life, however you want to define that. I use whatever terminology you want to use. I happen to need structure in my life. So it is not the roadmap. It is a roadmap. You don't have to follow my roadmap. It's here as a path for you. But I really do believe we all have to find our own path. You're welcome to use anything that I offer to you in your own path, or my hope is that I will inspire you to come up with your own pillars of an authentic life, of a good life, however that is. And then afterwards, as I say, we'll have a dialogue about it, some reactions, some comments, some questions, and we'll have some time to do that. So let me first of all tell you my story here. In my 20s and my 30s, we've been working hard at packing, so I'm probably pretty emotional today. But in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, really the first 30 years of my adult life, I connected with motivational speakers, and they provided for me, again, they're motivational speakers. These are 6 of sort of the primary motivational people that inspired me in my early career, in my early adulthood. And the message that I got from these speakers, they created a paradigm within me. And I don't know if they meant to in their messaging, but these people, and I in no way want to be critical. I received a tremendous amount of growth from every one of these speakers that I followed. And back in the day, I would listen to the cassette tapes, and I would be plugging it into, you know, actually, I don't have Zig Ziglar up here, but you know, it's Automobile University, where we would sit and listen to these tapes over and over and over. And I got trained and I got conditioned. And the message that I got in my early adulthood, because I was raised well, but I was searching for something to give me a solution to life's problems. And you could pick worse people to follow. These people all had a great influence in my life. But the message that I got was that success is measured by money. Bigger is better, and you can achieve anything you put your mind to. Now, these aren't bad messages, and I don't even know if this was the intention of these speakers and these leaders in my life to give me these messages, but they came into my life at a vulnerable time when I was searching to be more of who I could be. And they were a great inspiration to me, and they were a great model for me. And they were a tremendous, just a guide in my life to go and take courses from these people and to learn from them and to be guided by them. But here's what it resulted in. 20 years ago, I found a home, and one of the things that we did is I set my goals out, and one of the things is that I had this idea about what kind of a home that I wanted to live in. And we discovered this home. It's on 2 acres, but it's on the edge of 100 acres of nature conservancy. This is our backyard. And it was, this is Jumping Pound Creek, just west of Cochrane here in Western Canada, in Alberta. And, this is a fishing creek. I took the kids fishing in the mornings. I took my grandson fishing. We'd go down and swim in the swimming hole. It was a beautiful environment. My kids appreciated the land. We appreciated the environment, but it cost a lot of money. And when we bought this place almost 20 years ago, I was at a stage. I have to tell you, I'm not a great businessman. I bring great value to clients. I understand that, but I'm not inherently a businessman that knows how to really create wealth and how to codify my message and how to make my message bigger. I tried for many years listening to these motivational speakers. And what we came up against is when this house was proposed to us, and it needed about $700,000 in renovation, because it's a architecturally designed house. It was built in 1972, but it hadn't been kept up. Beautiful structure, beautiful environment. but we needed to put about 100,000 beyond what we paid for it. And so it was an expensive home. And at that time, I could not afford it. And what I did was I went to a bank, and in fact, I went to 3 banks before we found somebody that would, and 2 banks said, no, I'm not going to loan you the money. You just don't have the cash to do this. I would not recommend you borrow this money. And I listened to the voice of these motivational speakers that said, you know what? You can do this. I can create wealth. And I moved into this paradigm, and we convinced the banker, and we managed for the last 20 years to pay for this property. But it has put and it's been a beautiful property, but it has put a huge degree of stress on me. And I didn't realize it until this winter when my wife and I sat together and we went through the process that I'm going to share with you today. I didn't realize the cost that this had on me to keep that stable of workhorses fed, keep the motor running. It constantly put pressure on me. And it really created a real challenge for me. And so we spent our time here, we invested in this, but I got to tell you, I've slept better in the last 3 months when we decided to sell this place and downsize and move to a smaller place, move to a place in town. I can't tell you the pressure that's been taken off of me to really go through the process that I'm going to share with you, the roadmap that I'm going to share with you today. I've been teaching this roadmap, but I actually put it to work and started to examine it. Now, I have to tell you that there were a number of people along the way. It wasn't just success. The success folks, the success leaders that influenced me. I also had the impact of many people. One person is on this call today, Don Campbell, who had a tremendous impact on me and has had an impact on me this last 40 plus years that I've known Don. My parents had a great impact on me. A man by the name of Alan Savory, Steve Covey, Jim Rieger, who is a colleague of mine, Jim Rohn, my dear wife, Val, and a man named Parker Palmer, who has impacted my thinking deeply. All of these individuals were planting seeds. These were also teachers and guides in my life, and they were planting seeds. But those seeds were buried by the voice of the success literature that said, I got to be more, I got to be bigger. I have to drive this thing and make myself bigger to keep up with it. And it wasn't just to pay pay for the property and the house, the home that we lived in. It was also a way of defining my worth, to know that I'm somebody because I can make a mark in the world. I can make an influence in the world. And even though some of these individuals have made a great influence in their life, that was not the message that came through from these people that were planting a seed. These people were telling me character over charisma, choose service over self-interest, choose substance over superficial, contribution. The difference that you make is more important than size, and finding your own voice, not the voice of the world, but the voice, your own inner voice. And each of these in their own way, these leaders were guiding me to these principles. But what I discovered is these principles never really took root in me until I was in my 60s, until I was in my, until I'm at this stage in my life where I began to realize that's what they've been teaching me. And it came from a series of wake-up calls. First of all, the 3.5-year journey with my brother through his cancer journey in the late 2000s. 2013, he was diagnosed and he passed in 2017. The pandemic certainly shook me up. Heightened stress that I've been dealing with, and the lack of sleep, and the disruption in my soul, my own mental health challenges. I have a very sensitive nervous system. It's my gift as well as my curse. It gives me my ability to reach leaders and coach and reach people, but it also, the downside of it is that I absorb people's emotions. And it can lead to some depression and anxiety that I've had the opportunity to deal with and have to come to grips with. Reaching the age that my father died, I started this year to really take a close look. My dad was this age when he passed, and I started to really take a close look at what this thing is not going to run forever. This runway that I'm on is going to not run forever. And I start to have some deeper reflections, some deep conversations with some friends and community. I've got one of my workout buddy that I train with 3 times a week. He and I have some deep conversations in between the bench presses and the squats about what the meaning of life is, and where are we putting our money, and what are our goals, and what really matters, and what does it mean to work in corporations, and what happens to our lives when we come home from work, when we're working 60 or 70 hours a week. And then the thing that really culminated it and put it together was a visit with our financial planner. And we started to really look at reality and where are we? And, I really am not in a place where I want to retire right now, but I want to be financially independent so I don't have to work. I don't want to, this has been my gig for the last 40 years is I've had my own corporate job. Somebody says, well, I've had my own business since 1982. And somebody says, well, boy, you've had a lot of freedom. Well, actually, I've had my own corporate job. My corporate job is serving corporations and taking care of clients. And is that what I want to do for the rest of my life? So I've been just doing a lot. These wake-up calls have been really reflective for me and putting me in a reflective place. And then I've also been reflective with my wife, and we've really decided together what's important to us. So the 4 fundamental authenticity questions is, how do you define your quality of life? How do you define success? How do you know your worth? And what will sustain you and the quality of life that you desire? And to stop and really ask yourself, you got to step off that treadmill, the busyness treadmill, and ask yourself some of these questions if you're going to live authentically. Aligned with your own purpose, aligned with your own values. So I'll just kind of go through these one at a time, and we'll give you the roadmap here in a second in terms of responding to some of these questions. In terms of, I'll start with the last one, what sustains us? I have a suspicion that some of us pay more attention to our cell phone than we do ourselves. We always, we know at the end of the day when the cell phone's out, but do we know at the end of the day when we're out? What do we do to recharge yourself? What do you do? I mean, it's one of the reasons I work out regularly, because it actually is a way of recharging my mind as much as it is recharging my body. What do we need to do to sustain ourselves and to pay attention to what's really happening inside of ourselves, asking ourselves, what are our goals and what really matters? And are we so caught up in what the culture expects from us? And I have to give credit to this organization called Holistic Management. This is a bunch of ranchers that ranch in such a way that they're stopping the desertification of our soil. And I've related regenerative ranching and farming to regenerative living. And they've taught me a great deal, this community of ranchers, through what they call holistic management, that was started by Alan Savory. And how do we take a pasture that's been depleted and restore it? Regenerative agriculture means to regrow or renew, or especially after being damaged or lost. And many of us have been beaten down in the cultures that we live in, whether corporations, whether they're organizations, bureaucracies, wherever we have been living. Many of us are not living in systems that support the human spirit, that support our lives, that support our values. And yet we're caught in this culture that tells us what we should be and how we could be. And we get depleted, and we need a regenerative process, which is what I'm going to be offering you. And I just need to give credit to these ranchers that have taught me so much about my life. And I know, Don Campbell, you've been integral to that whole organization, and I appreciate your continued support. And where we start with is regenerative living is to start with a clear understanding of a quality of life for yourself. How do you define a quality of life for yourself? Oftentimes what we do is that we get producing, and our lives become a series of tasks that pushes the quality of life out of us, instead of being proactive and asking ourselves, what is the quality of life that we desire? Now, here are some of the elements of my quality of life. These may not be your elements, but here's some elements to consider if you just, and by the way, I'm giving you a whole gamut of ideas in this presentation. what I would encourage you to do is to reflect deeply, maybe pick one. Hey, I'm going to work on my quality of life statement. Maybe just one statement. I'm going to work on my values. I'm going to work on my core principle. I'm going to work on my purpose. Pick one. I'm just giving you a whole map. And then you can pick and choose which one you feel what resonates with you. So how's your inner life, your well-being? Everything, as I said, flows from there. Your physical health, your energy, your relationships, the quality of your relationship, your housing criteria. What do you want in a home? What do you need in a home? And again, this is assessing wants versus needs. We've confused that, just like we've confused standard of living with quality of life. I've seen many people with a very high standard of living that have a very poor quality of life. And I've seen people in this planet that have a very low standard of living, according to the world standards, but have a very high quality of life. These are not necessarily related. Environmental stewardship. What do we want to do to contribute to our environment, to do our part to sustain our environment? What do I want to do in terms of lifelong learning, my contribution to the world, and how much joy do I feel in my life? So define for yourself each of these areas. Sit and reflect. It requires some reflection to sit and reflect and think carefully about what do each of these areas mean to you and how are they operating in your life? And then you can begin to say, how hard do I want to work to create that quality of life that's important to me, and make that explicit and make that meaningful. Okay. Now, and again, I can't, the authentic path is that you find your own path and leave a trail. I can give you guideposts, but I can't give you that path, or else it wouldn't be authentic. Okay. So again, here's another question. How do you define success? Is it defined in material goods? Is it defined in size? How do you define success? Do you define success by the car that you drive? Do you define your identity by the house that you live in and what you've created around you and the stuff in your life? This is often how we define success. Take a careful look at that. If you carefully consider what you want to be said at your funeral, you will find your own definition of success. If you really stop and think, we spend our lives on this external path so often. And when we come to the end of our life, what really is remembered is the impact that we had on people, the kind of person the person was. It's that difference between eulogy virtues and resume virtues. We spend our life building a resume, and then at the end of our life, we're remembered for the virtues, by the inner qualities that we have, by the kind of person that we were. Not that we're going to be around in our funeral, but that's one of the ways that we can look at what our definition of success is. So I just want to say, in my reflections, I've come up with the difference between secondary success and primary success. Secondary success is what the world sees: prosperity, position, polls, popularity, and public image are ways that we define ourselves based on what the world sees. But underneath the soil are the roots. And you can't tell the strength of a tree by looking at necessarily what you see. It's what you don't see. That's primary success, which is substance, character, contribution, the difference that you make, your ability to connect with people, your consideration and kindness, and your curiosity. You're bringing through life the sense of being a lifelong learner. These are ways that we can define primary success. And again, I'm using my terminology here. Come up with your own terminology. But here's a couple of questions for reflection. In what ways have you been chasing secondary success at the expense of primary success? And what does your deepest conscience, your moral compass, tell you about what is right? We are not taught historically, culturally, to listen to our conscience. Oftentimes it's put in a religious context where the church tells you, but my feeling is a church's role needs to be to guide you to your own conscience, your own moral purpose, your own moral compass. This sense of, I've been really studying lately this notion of a conscience, and notice and from my own experience, being guided to that conscience. And it's very difficult to tap into that conscience. I call it my authentic self. You can call it whatever you want, your soul, your heart, but it goes below the impulse of your feelings to what is really right in your life. And if we are not careful, like me, I spent 20 years following the conscience of other people who told me and defined for me what success is. And it was it catapulted me into a successful life, but it was a lot driven by secondary success. Even though I was talking about primary success, I was going to say unconsciously. I think I was pretty conscious that secondary success really took a paramount, really was paramount. So I'm going to leave you in this last half an hour what I have found to be the 4 pillars of an authentic life. And again, this was inspired by Dr. Paul Kretzmann, professor and pastor. But again, I don't necessarily feel like you have. These are my pillars, is what I'm saying. Come up with your own pillars. I'd love to hear what your pillars are in the dialogue. I'd love to hear what I've missed. Make them your own. But I love to prepare these talks because I prepare what I need to learn. What we're most capable of teaching is what we're most in need of developing. So these pillars were good for me to put words to this so that I could make sure it's that structure that I welcome and appreciate in my own life. So giving this speech and preparing for this webinar today was really good as a strength for me to identify what are those pillars for myself. And that the requirement for me to have a structure. Not everybody needs a structure. You can take 1 or 2 of these pillars and say, hey, I'm going to lead more structure. I'm not implying in any way that everybody needs these 4 pillars. It's just a model. It's not the model. Okay. So again, the 4 pillars, if you read my article this month, something to live by, something to live for, something to live on, and something to live with. So I'm going to offer to you just one of these at a time, okay? Something to live by. So what does it mean to be guided? And what I have learned in my life through my own suffering, through my own pain, through my own internal reflection and my own journey, I have come up with what I call unwavering principles. You can call them values if you want, but I call them unwavering principles. And a lot of this has come from my own recovery journey, from my own challenges with mental health. I know for me, my life works better when I have a framework for making decisions, where I have a framework for everything coming through this framework, and I make decisions based on these 5 principles. Number 1 is contentment. Now, I've mentioned this. Everything flows from my own well-being. Now, this has broad application for me personally. Again, these are my principles. They don't need to be yours, but these are mine that guide my life. And I've had to do this to keep up. I've often said my own mental health challenges. I was told by a psychiatrist once, the key to a long and happy life is to get diagnosed with a chronic life-threatening illness and have to take care of it every day of your life. And that's been the case for me with depression and anxiety and some of my mental health challenges. I've had to I've become a healthier person because I have to take care of these challenges. Everything flows from my well-being. So before I take on work, I want this to be my guiding principle to say, is it going to impact my well-being? I have to take care of myself first. This is one of the reasons why I put exercise as a high value for me, because it keeps my well-being in place. And I am very careful, no matter whether I'm going through transitions or not, or challenges or not, I keep up some basic disciplines in my life that keep my well-being in place. Some quiet time in the morning, some morning meditation, some structure in the morning that give me a sense of stability and contentment with what I have, so that everything will flow from there, and the quality of my work will flow from me taking care of myself. So it's the difference between self-centered and self-caring. Self-care says I take care of myself so that then I can take care of you. Self-centered says I take care of myself so I can take care of myself. It's very insulated. But this is what these are all very personal to me, and I won't necessarily be able to express them adequately, but I want to just give you a taste of my own unwavering principles and encouragement that you might want to develop some of your own. Character, which is the courage to face the demands of reality. This is a very personal one for me. It has to do with my recovery and my recovery from addiction, and realizing that instead of escaping life, I need to deal with reality. I need to be honest about reality. I need to face reality, and I need to face the demands of reality. And at the end of the day, I have a lot more self-respect when I do that. Connection is the quality of my relationships. Contribution is the meaning that comes from what I give, not from what I get. This is a huge value of me. It was planted early in my life, and it really is aligned with my soul. And curiosity, life is a schoolhouse, and the best teacher is adversity. And all of life throws experiences at us. And those experiences are learning opportunities, not to be withdrawn from, but to be leaned into and learn and get the lesson. Another way to say this is talking about being an integrated leader. And I can tell the best leaders that I have worked with over the years are the leaders, regardless of what their title is. The best leaders are what I call an integrated leader. And that means they're working on their integrity gaps in these areas. Now, I've done coaching and counseling and consulting and running workshops again for 40 years. And I have boiled it down to 10 key areas in life. And again, you could use different language for these areas. And again, and I purposefully put them in a cog like this, because if you change any area on this map, it'll change all the areas. Your inner well-being and a purposeful living, family, whatever that means to you in terms of significant relationships in your life, your own personal health, friendships, community and contribution, financial stability, play and renewal, creativity, learning and development, having your own personal learning and development plan. So look at each of these areas in your own life. And when we do the academy, we go into this in much more detail, but basically what we look at is rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, how important, you can use your own words in some of these, how important are each of these areas to you? So for example, you might be in a stage right now where creativity isn't really all that important to you. I don't need to be a creative person. And so you would rate that low if it's not important to you. Now, the manifestation is, how creative are you? Do you feel right at this moment? So if you rate creativity as a 2 and your manifestation of that is a 2, there's no gap. So there's no stress in your life. It's not what I call an integrity gap. So you don't have to worry about that. Where you get concerned is where you find what I call integrity gaps, where you might say, for example, friendships in my life are on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9. And looking at my current relationships, I've been so busy at work, I have not taken time for friendships in my life. And so right now the manifestation is a 2. So now we have a gap that you can assess and make a commitment to close those gaps. So one of the things you might do is take 2 or 3 of these and say, where are there gaps in your own life? And if you change anything in your life, as Gandhi said, we are one indivisible whole. We're not a compartmentalized life. Everything impacts everything. So if you change any of these areas, it will impact in a positive way your leadership. You close any of the integrity gaps in your life, and it will impact the way that you lead by being a more integrated person. Maybe we got a person on this call today who's under a lot of financial stress. And, as my dad would say it, and again, he planted this seed years ago. I just didn't pay attention to it till I was in my 60s. But he would say, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much you spend. And are you always living below your means? And you might decide, you know what, I'm going to come out of this talk today and I'm going to get my finances in order. I'm going to get my debt in order. I'm going to put my quality of life. My debt is impacting my quality of life, and that's impacting my leadership. If some of you are stressed, living with a stressful leader that's insensitive because they're under financial stress at home, who knows what they're under? Maybe they're not taking care of their health in a way that's important to them. And if there's I'll promise you something, an integrity gap in your life breeds disrespect for yourself, and disrespect for yourself will lead to impacting others, and you'll end up harming others in one way or another through insensitivity, in a variety of ways, or through abuse. In some ways, if you're disrespecting yourself, you can't help but disrespect the people around you. We talk about building a respectful workplace. Folks, if you don't have self-respect by closing the integrity gaps in your life, there's no hope that you're going to build a sustainable, respectful workplace. It's an inside job, okay? And this comes back to what I got from Steve Covey around the urgent and important. The work that I'm talking about today is important. There's 4 kinds of demands. There's urgent demands that push on you. There's important demands that you push on. Then there's urgent and important, and then there's neither urgent or important. And again, urgent without important is a distraction. Most of us spend our lives in the necessity, the things that are urgent that press on us and that are also important. What I'm suggesting is to get into to grow the important circle. And that's where fulfillment lies, when we begin to really take a close examination of what matters in our life. And again, it comes back, I think we're probably all familiar with this notion of the big rocks and the sand. The sand is the urgent, the big rocks are important. And the key in life, and I knew Steve Covey back in high school. I went to a course that he taught in Edmonton when I was in high school. And then I took a university class from him years later. And I will never forget this analogy of the big rocks. And the one thing that stayed with me is schedule the big rocks first. At the beginning of the year, decide what your big rocks are. And the big rocks are the facets in your life that require a minimum weekly attention. The relationships in your life, your health, whatever is important to you that comes out of those guiding principles, schedule those in first. And then the sand will have lots of room to meander around. If you put the sand in first and let the world crowd you out, there's no room for the big rocks. All right, that's something to live by. Now let me talk about something to live for. Something to live for, which is a sense of purpose. A sense of purpose. And again, in our academies, we delve much more deeply into this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on purpose. We do this in when we get into this, when we're together in more time, but I'll just give you a quick introduction to purpose. The 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day that you find out why. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them to tasks and work, but rather inspire them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. This, when you're working with purpose, you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I have a reason to show up at the gym because I don't want my health. I'm going to do everything I can to not have my body get in my way of living my purpose. So I want to stay healthy mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, so that I can live what my purpose is. It gives me a reason for going to the gym. It gives me a reason for getting up in the morning when I can remember what my purpose is. I'm going to leave you just this one thought on purpose. I think we've all know the Noah story. This guy named Noah got this calling to round up all the animals. Well, I have this notion, and I'm going to challenge all of you to have a Noah project in your life. A Noah project is an endeavor that serves a noble cause and has enduring value beyond one's life. How would you describe some of it? How would you describe it? What noble goal are you pursuing today? What project are you engaged in? Now, some of it, it might be your own Noah project, or maybe you're supporting another Noah project that's aligned with your heart. I'll tell you a couple of Noah projects right now that I'm working on. And I would encourage, maybe it'll be on the corner of your desk as a part of your work. Maybe it's the stuff you do when you come home at night. You talk to your boss and say, you know what, this is a project that's very important to me, and I'd like to take the lead in this project because it's aligned with my heart. And it gives me a sense of purpose. And, maybe it's 10% of your job, but it gives you a reason for coming to work because there's passion in it. You feel called to do it. It's not just a make work project. It's something that really means something deeply to you. This is this is not my project, but I'm the board of director. I'm a chair of the board of directors of Wayfinders Wellness, which supports first responders and veterans. We have a ranch just west of where I live here, west of Cochrane. And we've been donated this ranch. And we have a bee program, and we have a equine program. We have an indigenous program. We have an arts program. And on this ranch, we have first responders. It's designed, the whole organization is designed to serve first responders and veterans who have PTSD, who have psychological wounds from their work. And we serve them and their family. We bring their families out, and they're part of a community here. And it's an amazing cause. And I just want to plant a seed. We have our AGM coming up, and we've got a few board positions that people are not renewing their contract, their next tenure. So we're open for some board. If you feel a sense of wanting to be involved with supporting this cause, get a hold of me, connect with me, and I'll put you in touch. This is a tremendous cause, and it's given me a real meaning to support this NOAA project. You know, I travel around the continent, but I wanted to be involved in a local project that was building community in my own local area that I could really stay with and be a part of, rather than coming in and helping and then leaving town. So this is one of my NOAA projects. The other one is that we are revamping the whole Authentic Leadership Academies. We're not going to be doing any academies this fall. We're going to rebrand them. We're going to revise them. I'm working with a team of amazing people, an entrepreneur who really values my work, we're going to put these together in a whole new way. So I'll be on the lookout for those in the new year, but and we're really designing my own NOAA project to bring these academies to the world in a whole new way, where we'll have these public workshops and have a whole program. Here's a NOAA project. This guy, every time I see this is a guy by the name of Lyle Brown John, who took a 1951 Austin panel van and turned it into this van that he drives all over the country. His goal, he's driven it all over Western Canada. He started in BC. He's driven it all over Western Canada, and he measures success by miles per gallon. And this is his NOAA project. So it could be very unique. It doesn't have to be necessarily but one big world change, but one big changing thing. But, you know, with all of the news this summer and the tragedies that have happened, he's just bringing a little bit of balance to this whole notion. He's a crazy guy, but I love this guy that he's 73 years old, and he's 71, and the Austin is 73 years old, and he's just having a blast. And that's some indicator that a NOAA project should be actually doesn't feel like work, because it's really aligned with our heart and it comes easy to us. So have some fun with this, defining what your NOAA project is. All right, then we need to have something to live on. And I don't want to talk too much about money, but I do have to plant this seed, because I realize how much integral money has been in my life, and I suspect in yours. While money won't buy you happiness, what it will buy you is options. And there's nothing wrong with options, but financial character is a disciplined approach to living below your means, and to making sure that whatever you can afford, you buy less than what you can afford, and that you make room in your life, make a space, put your investments first before you spend it on what brings you pleasure. And it just creates a cushion of relaxation. And I just know this from my own experience, that when you're maxed out with your credit cards and debt, and what happens is it creates undue stress that will impact the relationships, every relationship that you're in, and it will impact all your leadership work if you're under stress. So just take a careful look at that. Creating wealth, no problem, but make sure you live below your means and have the discipline to do that. And I've watched this last 3 months, being in the home shopping business. So we've been touring homes and watching behavior around homes, and how people buy homes, and how much emotion is tied with these big decisions, rather than really careful analysis of where's your quality of life in this, and does this home fit your quality of life, and have you really assessed that properly, and go through a very rational process before you spend. You know, we all love the smell of a new vehicle, but it's a waste of money to buy a brand new vehicle. We all understand that, unless that is what you've decided to be in your quality of life, that I love the smell of new vehicles. I can afford new vehicles. I can pay cash for a new vehicle, and I'm going to enjoy it. No problem. But just be aware that it costs a lot of money to buy a new vehicle or to lease a vehicle. Just be aware and conscious of how your financial decisions impact the quality of your life. That's all I want to say about money. And then finally, we have to have something to live with. You know, you can have a purpose, you can have great values, you can have good, strong principles, you can be very healthy, you can be in good shape. But if you don't get this thing called love, it's hard to find any meaning in your life when you do all this structured work if you're going to end up alone. Love is not a feeling. Love is an action. Love means giving to the world what we expect from the world. This is marriage counseling 101. Whatever you expect from your partner, give to your partner. Learn how to love. Learn how to have people around you. It may be in a significant relationship. It may be in the connections that you make with your friends, but we need a community. We have to live with this thing called love. And the last thing I want to share with you today is a little video here. Oh, no, before I get to the video, I want to just talk about my dad and what I learned from my dad. And then I'll share with a video. I learned, many of you have heard my story, but my dad had an open heart. He really struggled with mental illness. I inherited some of the gift of his own depression. He was very prone to get depressed, but he had an open heart. And everywhere he went, he would open his heart to people. When we went to the grocery store, we'd be 10 minutes in line because he'd be talking to the clerk, making the clerk feel better. We went to the dump once a month. We call them landfill sites, but back in those days, we went to the dump, and there was a guy who lived at the dump in our local dump. My dad was a farmer, among other things, an artist, a social worker. But we would travel to the dump every month to take the garbage. And there was a guy, you can't live at the dump anymore, but this guy lived at the dump. His name was Monty. I wish we didn't have the internet in those days. I wish I would have caught a picture of him. He was this big old guy. I say old, he's probably 40 years old, but he had this long beard and these tattered overalls. He lived on what everybody else dropped off. So he lived in clothes that somebody else dropped off. And he lived in a trailer that somebody else dropped off. He had an old bicycle that somebody else dropped off. And we would sit my dad wasn't a coffee drinker, but he would take a pot of hot chocolate and sit with Monty for an hour and have a visit with him every time we went to the dump. And that place stunk. We'd go in his old trailer and the place would stink, and I could hardly stand it. And I could never figure out why my dad would take the time for a guy like this, that ordinarily society has discarded. My dad taught me that everybody has something good to offer you. Everybody has something valuable to teach you, and learn from everybody that you meet. And when my parents sold the farm in 1984, old Monty rode his bike about 15 miles come and say goodbye to my dad. And I think my dad was his only friend. I remember him shaking hands with my dad with tears in his eyes and thanked him for all those visits over the years where we would come and spend with him. And my dad led with those values. I'm just sorry that those values didn't get implemented and ingrained in me fully until I was in my 60s, but they were always there. Okay. I've wept in the night at my shortness of sight, that to someone's need was I blind, but I've never yet had a twinge of regret for being a little too kind. So I'm just going to leave you a little 3-minute video here on the power of kindness. If you remember nothing today, just remember, you know what, maybe I'm not going to work on my big Noah project, and maybe I'm not going to clarify the principles that I run my life with. Don't worry about it. Just be a little kinder today, and notice how the world will be kinder in return.
เขาจะได้อะไรถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวัน เขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลย ไม่ได้รวยขึ้น ไม่ได้ออกทีวี ไม่มีใครรู้จัก ไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้น เพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้ คือได้แค่ความรู้สึก ได้เห็นความสุข ได้เข้าใจ ได้ความรัก ได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิม ในชีวิตคุณ อะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
So folks, in summary, make room for regular reflection, to listen to your own voice away from the clamoring of the world. Make sure you're living your life, not somebody else's. You can't believe how many successful entrepreneurs that I've met who are very unhappy. And I asked them, you know, where did you get the idea that you had to be driven to build this business? And they're still being driven by a parent who's been dead for 20 years. Make sure your voice is your voice. Make sure you're following your voice. Take time to clarify your values or your core principles, your 10-year goals, a purpose, a defined quality of life. Just take a little time, whatever has struck a chord with you, make a little time while it's fresh on your mind this weekend to get out a journal and write some of this. Identify any integrity gaps that you have and make an agreement with yourself to work toward closing things. And if all else fails, bring a little more kindness and gratitude to the world. The world needs this at this time. Okay, folks, I hope that's been helpful to you. At this point, I'll just say next webinar will be Friday, September 27th at the same time, Embracing Change, the Power of Possibility. That'll be up on my website now if you want to register for it, or we'll send you out a note. If you need anything, please reach out to Val. She's a beautiful person and my partner in my life. And there's my website for those of you who may not have it. Thanks, everybody, for listening in.